Hi, I'm Bruce McNab.
Hi, I'm Archie now.
My parents had chickens, so I recall the chickens in two massive big buildings and the chicken excrement where it used to go over the bank like that. Remember an owl got in the chicken house was a big deal. Archie will remember that better than I do, perhaps.
You got planted by the 303, which was quite a big deal. There's a lot of chicken deaths, I would say. Yeah, I had quite a, well, first it was an egg laying operation and had layer hens, and then later on the cages were taken out and we just had fryers. I don't know if either one was a tremendously good thing to graze, but it turned out the old man had lung problems, and they diagnosed part of the problem back to poultry dust as being a major irritant or cause of it, and so he had to move on to some other form of farming. So that was the end of the chicken business. But the remnants lasted on for a bit longer there because we did still have the manure spreader that Bruce talks about, and we still had the frame from one of the buildings. Later became a greenhouse.
Yeah, my memory of the greenhouse was trying to put poly on, and our dad was not good at planning this. And as I got older, I came to realize that you can plan so that the wind is calm in the morning, and then it really starts to pick up. So we'd be trying to put plastic on that greenhouse, and it would be like a kite in the wind. It'd just be taking off, and we're all hanging on to it. Pretty much a disaster, but honestly, my memory of putting the poly on the greenhouse. And Murray breaking his wrist, driving the tractor, and the posts were still in there to hold the roof up, and Murray was driving the tractor and the wheel hit the post and spun the wheel and broke his wrist. I recall that.
We had, like a lot of those farmers in those days, not very much money, and when the original front tires on the tractor went, the easiest thing to replace them with was just used truck tires. There was plenty of those around, but the used truck tires really don't steer very well, and if they hit something, contact something, you're fairly unforgiving. They don't bounce off of it. They latch on it. That's what happened with Murray's wrist.
Pretty much straight to work, as I recall.
Yeah, I think he had time to get a sandwich together and then head off to work in the fields. It depended upon the time of year as to what work those you've done. There's always something to do, but in the springtime, of course, you'd be planting, and then later on, weeding, which was a lot of hoeing back in those days before we got on to using a sprayer, and then tending the crops, and then harvesting in the fall was a big deal. In the late fall and through the winter, it'd be sorting potatoes was the number one activity in the evenings then, and there always seemed to be quite a few of those to sort.
Ooh, playing baseball in the peat field when the water first dried off. We'd have a stick, like a limb off of a tree, and a sponge rubber ball, and we'd be barefoot, and somebody would hit the ball and we'd go running through the mud or the peat to go and catch the ball. I thought that was pretty fun. Our memory of mine. And that was one thing, our parents let us go barefoot all the time. That was fun. Don't think city folks had that. I was going to mention, Archie was saying about grading potatoes in the barn, and it gets dark, just like it gets dark at this time of the night. And our dad, there'd be the four of us and our dad grading potatoes, and Ross would get sent over to the house first to do homework, have a bath, off to bed. Then I would get set next. I have this memory of it being dark, and I always thought it was so far from the barn to the house, but you could see the back porch light on the house, and I would just scamper from the corner of the barn all the way, because I was sure there was something in the dark that I couldn't see, and I was just like wide open every time. I remember that, so I must have been pretty young at that time.
Yeah, that would have been from the far end of the barn. 278 would be even worse. It was a longer run.
Our dad angry? I think about this. I heard our dad raise his voice twice in his entire life. He was so peaceful. to me, that's my memory. He was so peaceful.
Yeah.
I heard him shout twice. Pretty remarkable.
Because what? Because of you don't remember the incident.
The one time I do remember, back at the time I'm with my dad, we're in Vancouver going down West Georgia. And at that time, the BC government had come up with, they put decals on the license plate. It was when they first did it. And because our dad's van had agricultural plates, the decal was on the front maybe instead of the back, or vice versa, it doesn't matter. But the police pulled my dad over. What's West Georgia? Cars are boom, boom, boom. So first of all, my dad's annoyed. How stupid are the police to put up this checkpoint on, not like slow the traffic down, just step out into traffic and pull them over. So my dad's annoyed about that. So the police officers saying to my dad about the, he doesn't have a decal. So my dad gets out of the vehicle, he does have a decal. So the police officer's telling him the decal's on the wrong plate. And my dad knew that the decal was on the right plate. I saw him get a little bit heated up with a police officer, because the police officer is a young guy that doesn't know what he's talking about. My dad knew he was right. He was annoyed because the police were causing almost an accident on West Georgia. So I saw that one time, and another time my dad was harvesting vegetables way up in the field, and I had a stock car. And of course the neighborhood kids come down and they want, to run around in the fields in the stock car. So good. So somebody's driving it into the ditch they go. And of course the stock car is loud because it's a race car. My dad was working up there, and I think he was a little frustrated that the kids were ripping around in useless activity, and he was working up there, and I heard him shout from all the way up there, "You can just leave it right in the ditch. Like, don't go get the tractor and pull it out, just leave it right there." Those are my 2 times.
I know the one time I recall, Dad wasn't, I think he was angry, but the way he put it to us made us feel, I felt pretty bad, because he came, and it is when we were living over in the Lower Mainland, I think at the time still, and we had just been little holy terrors or whatever, at least a few of us had for sure, and had finally driven Mom to tears, which is a pretty rare accomplishment, and Dad was so upset with us, and it's pretty.
Yeah, I remember that.
One of the few times I think I ever saw him get upset. Even when another of us got badly wounded, and that he was always seemed to take that stuff pretty much with a grain of salt. When we had, which must have been big financial setbacks on the farm, and that he just
I never said anything about it.
never.
Yeah, I'm sure they were barely making the payments, if they were making the payments, and they never talked about it.
I do recall. Similar to Bruce's story there, we had finished digging all the potatoes for the year, got them all out before it rained, which is a pretty rare feat in itself. Had a pretty good crop, and a bunch of us had, did we all have a Volkswagen then? At least 3 or 4 of us did anyway. Mm-hmm. And so once the potatoes were harvested off the field, we were running these things around like a racetrack around him. And he was sitting on a 5-gallon pail in the middle of that thing, watched us going around, laughing. Thought we must look like a bunch of kooks.
Yeah. Young kids wasting time.
Yeah. See, one thing that's kind of unique or different about our parents is that Mom was from a very large family. She had 12, or I guess there was 12 brothers and sisters, so 13 in her family. Dad was an only child. And so a lot of times when we get up to tricks and that, he had a hard time understanding, where did these guys even get these ideas from? And my mom, of course, raised a whole bunch of brothers. I don't think there was much nonsense we pulled off she hadn't already seen at one point in her career in another. Maybe not the exact same format, but certainly, boys are boys, I guess, no matter where they are.
Didn't mention, do you remember this, Archie, when we would take the double-bitted axe from the woodshed, go up a hill road or somewhere and cut down a tree. So we're quite young. I don't know how old. I might have been 8 years old, roughly like that. And we take the axe from the woodshed, double bitted, and we go up and we cut at a tree. We would take turns, 4 of us. It would just like gnaw around like a beaver. And then we'd keep going. And over the course of a couple days, we gnawed enough wood out that it fell over. And I don't know how our parents could not have heard that tree go over. But they never said anything. Never said the axe was missing from the woodshed. And of course, when the tree went over, I just remember running in every direction because nobody knew where the tree was going to go. And it was not a little tree.
Yeah. I think you would have been younger than that, actually, because I remember doing that in when we were still in Surrey. And when we came over here, we had so much more real estate to, the chance of being detected over here was pretty much
you
none
could hide
because
easier.
We had 100 acres to run around in. Well, we could, about 100 was bush, I guess. There was lots of places to hide.
Yeah, I was going to say that story. So I remember planting corn when we first started. Our dad would mark the field with the tractor. So it'd be like the tractor tire tracks. And then we would scratch rows with a hoe. One kid would go down, one kid would go down. I thought Mom always planted the corn, or maybe Dad did too. Plant the seeds, and then 2 other kids would come behind covering the seeds. And I remember when our grandpa came out and he thought that that was too uncivilized, and he bought a corn planter and sent it out. And I remember us putting that corn planter together. I can't remember again. I must have been pretty young, but I remember putting the corn planter together, and it was like a big mystery what part, how to go. And then we didn't have to do that hand planting anymore. It would save so much time.
Yeah.
See, and I thought our grandpa came out every 3 or 4 years back.
Yeah. Yeah, I recall when we first moved over the island that great grandpa came out as well, and he helped. I'm not sure how much help he was at the time. He would have been, if he wasn't 90, he was certainly very close to it. I suspect he was 90 actually or so at the time, and so he's helping Dad and Grandpa with digging the post holes for the barn. I remember that, and then putting in the corrals and stuff around the place there, and it was quite an adventure.
I was born in Surrey. Ross was born in Surrey. Bonnie and Jesse were born over here.
No, Bonnie, weren't you born in Surrey, Bonnie?
Yeah, and we moved over 2 months
Surrey
ago.
Memorial. Yeah, I thought you were.
Oh gosh.
Because there's a memory of that when you were born, that we're sitting out in, must have been a pickup. Good. What else could it? Well, could have been a van. There you go. Volkswagen van. Yes, there you go.
Van.
Yeah. Eating Dad's cookies. That was the high point, Bonnie.
Of the whole childbirth. Yeah, I remember Mom
You may call it differently.
Mom had a picture of the 4 of us boys sitting on that asphalt at the Horseshoe Bay Ferry Terminal with the Volkswagen van in the background that our parents had at the time.
And that would have been 62 or 3, I think.
I was going to say maybe
Well, we
63.
moved over in 62, I think.
Is that what it was, Bonnie? Because we had the van
Yeah,
real
'cause I
directly
was
after that.
2 months old when we moved over.
Because we had because we're still living over on the mainland when we had the van, because I remember going down the Horseshoe Bay Hill there and losing a couple of cartons of eggs off the back there on that little bench on the back there, slid off there down on the floor. An unholy mess, there's, I don't know how many, quite a few, enough to be a disaster anyway. But yeah, well, that was kind of the stuff looking back on it now. I'm not the world's greatest organizer, but some of that stuff that, parents did, you just like kind of wonder, why would you do it that way? Because why you slam on the brakes wherever the eggs go, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, at the same time, when you're lifting them into the back of the van, you're just setting them in. That's the easiest place to set them, just right in the back.
But it was at the Medical Arts Center in Nanaimo, and there's a nurse there. Her name's Brenda. I didn't even know until recently. And I said, "Oh, you're still not retired?" She's in her 70s. And I said, "I remember you when I was like a little kid." And she said, "I remember you kids when your dad would load 6 of you into that van to head down to California." And I was like, "Oh my." So that was a big event, going to California in the wintertime with our parents all inside of one vehicle. And in the beginning, it was a pickup truck with the 4 boys, and it was just a canopy on the back. 4 boys in that canopy laying on a sheet of plywood, Mom, Dad, and the 2 girls up the front. My mom did tell me this, that when they came to Vancouver Island to look for a farm, I took my mom one time up to Campbell River to visit a friend because I was working as a faller up in Port McNeill. So I drove her up, and then she was going to find her own way back. So we drove up. There was not the bypass, it was just the old island highway. We went through some most godforsaken community, and my mom said, oh, before Mom and Dad decided to buy in Yellow Point, they thought about buying this, and I looked over and it looked like it could feed a goat and a camel. It was just prickle bushes and rocks, and it looked rough. Yes. Yeah. Oh, it looked rough. And it's a little hill with the community. Yeah. So I'm glad they bought where they did and not up there. But yes, that's where it was. Why they chose? Oh, I think that's what Mom said. They bought this place because it had more cleared land than that property up there. Oh. Yeah, more farmable land than that place up there.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, he was raised on a farm. Mom was raised, I think, like she was raised Amish Mennonite, so they are all farmers of one kind or another there. Dad was, by all accounts, pretty successful in his farming endeavors prior to heading out west and having a family and all the rest of it. Then I think that changed the dynamics of it quite
considerably. Weird things down. Changed his lifestyle.
I can't even imagine doing that. I just can't.
Okay, I kind of got this feeling that myself, I had a feeling as I grew up on the farm that it was hard work, didn't make a lot of money. So as I graduated, I had a chance to work at Harmac, the mill that's over by Cedar. I went to work there, and I immediately realized my parents didn't make as much money as I did working at the mill. I got days off at the mill. There's no days off at the farm. You only had to work 8 hours a day. You work much more than that at the farm. My parents worked so much harder to make less money than I did as an 18-year-old kid working at that mill. But after I'd worked at that mill for about a year, maybe a year and 2 months, I realized that was not the future because the people there were so unhappy. They were paid a lot of money, but they were not happy. I could see my parents had a better lifestyle, more happy working on the farm with no money than the people working at the mill making a lot of money, but they were unhappy. So it's a real contradiction. But from there, I built up a career in construction, etc., where I do make really good money. but it's happy compared to working at the mill. There was something about that was not good. But yeah, so then going back to farming, I think Murray started it first with Adam, his son. They started growing some corn, and then he started the corn maze and etc. And my two oldest daughters, they were quite young, maybe when they were about 4 and 6 years old. They had some sunflower seeds, and they planted them in the big dirt pile by Mom's house. And of course, they didn't know. My mom went out and fertilized them. My mom went out and watered them, and these massive big sunflowers grew. And I just remember my daughter was so impressed that they put those little seeds in the ground and that grew. So then they, they tried it with beets and carrots and so on. And by the time they were young teenagers, I would take them to the farmer's market. But like most teenagers, by the time they were 14 or 15, yeah, Dad, whatever. But that's how it got to where I started growing vegetables again, was because Marie and Adam were doing it, and then my two daughters were having fun with growing some vegetables. And once it started, it just carried on.
Well, when I got out of school, I couldn't wait to get out as quick as possible. Went to work in the bush. Interesting story about that, because I worked in a logging camp, and one of the first days I was there, was out working on the hillside, setting chokers, which is supposed to be a very difficult and dangerous job, and I'm sure at times it definitely can be. I came back in, lined up at the cookhouse at night there, and there probably were 100 guys or more in the cookhouse, and one old faller, and they're kind of like the kings of the bush there, give me a smack on the shoulder and says, "Hey kid, what do you think about that? That smarted you up there and taught you how to do some work." And I just turned around, I was a smart-mouthed kid, 17 at the time, and said, "Blackie, never have I done so little work for so much money." And you could have heard a pin drop in the place. They were so pissed off at me. And what they didn't realize what I told him was the absolute truth. That I was making, I think, $4.06 an hour. In grade 12, I'd done an accounting project at school to calculate money we were making on the farm. And without even factoring my sister's and my mother's time into it, we were making 26 cents an hour. So $4, you're not working nearly as hard at all. Yeah, dangerous for sure, but it's not the same life as farm life at all. So I bounced around in logging, did a bit of farming, back logging, sawmilling, forester, quite a variety of careers over time, and enjoyed them all. Poultry operation, the laying hens there. I remember her candling eggs by hand before we finally bought a candler, like an automatic candler, that would actually anesthetize the eggs as well. It seemed the most magical machine because it could determine which eggs were bad as well as size them at the same time. Certainly helped out a lot with the work because she was doing it all by hand before that. But I do recall her when we had fryers, we were cleaning our own chickens, and she would work for hours and hours with her hands in pretty cold water. Yeah, cleaning chickens.
I remember getting up in the morning and that old washing machine, the old Rimmer washing machine would be going on the back porch. Mom had already been up, loaded it, had the whole thing going.
Yeah, if we had work to do, you kind of had to get along, because there's no other way to get the work done. Just the.
Oh, there's one more thing. I was just going to say that I didn't know how small the house was. It's like 800 square feet. So there's 8 of us in 800 square feet. You have to learn to negotiate. I think about that. And our parents were there all the time. So I think our parents guided us through that, being able to get along, so that, because as Richie said, we had to when we were working in the field. And in a small little house like that, you can't have many conflicts because everybody's in a tiny space. You learn to negotiate. I think that was part of it. And her parents had a really calm personality. It was not.
Yeah,
and
sure.
And I don't think I ever heard my dad swear.
No.
It was always, oh gosh, oh darn, or something. He had some way to say it without using a swear word. He didn't smoke, didn't drink.
One resort is German.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. She's, well, I guess that's pretty open to debate as to what, which, there's certainly Germanic for sure, but she was very, very smart. She could speak Dutch, Pennsylvanian Dutch, quite a few Flemish languages out too, without a great deal of difficulty at all. And she was an absolute wizard with numbers and logic problems. I think that time is the biggest healer of most wounds. It tends to resolve things over time. And also over time, we experience more life, and you realize that things that you thought were fairly big or significant problems at one time really turn out to be pretty small potatoes in the big picture.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a lot of gray, much black and white. Yeah, I wonder if that whole thing about, we're saying what you learn to negotiate was, as you say, Mom was so clever. I think she had a way of diffusing things before they ever became anything.
Family friends, there were a few in the farming community. Neither Dad nor Mom were real social people, so they didn't belong to clubs per se, or see a whole lot of other folks. But there were neighbors, of course, that we did spend time with. Some of them were pretty entertaining. We spent a lot of time at an Irishman and his wife's place up on the corner there, and they were like total polar opposites of our parents. So, I mean, maybe that gives us a good indication we had her pretty good. I don't know.
May I tell one story? Yeah. So the man Archie's talking about, his name is Milt Dunlop, and he was a chain smoker, and our parents didn't smoke. So his wife would roll, like the roll your own cigarettes, would roll up, I don't know, 3 or 4 packs for him the day before because he would smoke them nonstop. He was a welder and a heavy duty mechanic, so he came down to the farm to do some work on a potato digger on a machine at the farm. And so of course we would gather around because it was just like the circus came to the farm. So we're gathered around, and I distinctly remember he's welding, and he would flip up the helmet because he had some bullshit story to tell us little kids. He was just like so entertaining, and he lights, his cigarettes were right here, and he pulls it out, lights a cigarette like that, and he's puffing away. And we had a joke about how long the ash would get because he'd leave it in his mouth. He'd be talking like this, and the cigarette's bobbing like this, and the ash would be getting longer and longer. Well, he sets that cigarette down on the potato tire, on the wheel of the machine like that. And he goes back to welding, and he thinks up something else that's amusing to him, flips up the helmet. Of course, he pulls out another cigarette. Well, he's got one going there, but he pulls out another cigarette, tells us his little pearl of wisdom, flips the helmet down. He's still got a cigarette inside like that. He welds for maybe another minute, I don't know, flips the helmet up, and he goes for another cigarette. Well, he's got one going here, he's got one going there, and he's got the third one out of the package. Well, we're just roaring as kids because he was so absolutely opposite to our parents.
Yeah.
And he drove right off the road one time down by the local school, and we were sure, and he always had some kind of alcohol in his lunch kit that he took to work with him. We're sure that he was drinking or reaching for his bottle when he drove off the road. Anyway, like I say, totally opposite to our parents. Well, they were neighbors, and there was not a lot of neighbors up in the, and you learn to rely on one another and so on like that.
We had a big snowstorm in the mid-60s, I think it was.
Yeah, 65, I think.
And the power was out for, I think, 11 days. So these people had an oil furnace. Well, the oil furnace doesn't work when there's no power. So they actually moved down to our house after 3 or 4 days had gone by because they were so cold, and it was bitterly cold after it snowed that much because we had a wood stove. And so they moved down to our place there. It was kind of, it's not a big deal. It's just what people did in those days. And nowadays, it seemed like something almost, you pick up their family and move it off down to the neighbor's place. So you didn't have it's something you do maybe in Cape Breton Island, but not here. Probably the most upsetting thing is if I let somebody down, or even with something that doesn't happen at that moment, and I'm thinking about it afterwards, that upsets me that I could have done a better job than what I did. What makes me happy is solitude, time alone, fishing, something like that, exploring. I enjoy that a lot.
I think what might upset me is when someone else doesn't see what I see. And not that they need to see what I see. Then maybe because they lack compassion. I think in that direction of they don't see what I see because they lack compassion. That I find that frustrating. What makes me happy is job well done. When I can see something and I can fix it that's confounding someone else, and it's so simple for me, I have a lot of fun with that. I really enjoyed that.
Well, sort of our next youngest brother, Murray, he's very, very engaging.
Good point.
Well, really well. Like, he should probably be a politician is what he should be. But he does have a couple of one, and I don't want to call it a flaw, but one characteristic trait, or one trait, is that he does not suffer fools gladly. He really doesn't have a lot of patience for that. But he's got a huge heart. Is always interested in helping other people. Next brother Bruce, as he just alluded to before, if I had something to fix or a problem to solve, he'd be the person I'd most likely go to talk to. The same if he had something to do that required diplomacy, I think he's by far the most diplomatic of any of us, for sure. Youngest brother Ross, I think, without a doubt, probably the one of the hardest working guys I've ever met. He's loyal to a fault. He doesn't get along with everybody, can be kind of prickly, but the people that he likes and the people that he thinks a lot of, he's all in on them. He's a tremendously loyal friend. Oldest sister Bonnie, she spends a lot of time in her working as a nurse, and I think that really, to me, was the job that, to me, most brought out her best qualities. Because she's incredibly caring, very very compassionate, quiet, and very, very efficient. Gets things done. Youngest sister, Jessie, she's so different from the rest of us. We often joke and tease her that she's not really, we wonder if she's actually related. She's very, very charismatic, very, very friendly, super smart, and she always comes off as being quite lighthearted, especially around when I'm talking to her. And I know that she has moments when she's not nearly as happy a person as that, but she always strikes me as a very happy person. So that's about that.
My brother right here, I mention this often. I wish I was more like him because he's happy-go-lucky. Where I do find some, when I have a problem and I can't solve it, I do get frustrated. Remember you were asking earlier about what frustrates me. So that is one thing. So I was heard more like Archie, where you could just like, yeah, whatever, we'll get that. We'll sort that out. We'll get that when we get to it. Murray, as Archie was saying, he's the schmoozer. He's around shaking hands. Basically, if he's not exactly, but that's his personality. Meeting and greeting and so on like that, where I'm just not that kind of person. When I get to know you, then I can talk to you about it, but I'm not going to walk up to you and say, how are you doing? Because I just assume not talk to you, or any person for that matter. So then Ross, like Archie was saying, very hardworking. He's kicked her back a notch, but we have a business together, and back in the day, there'd be times when I'd be, maybe if nobody made too much noise, we wouldn't have to work so late on Sunday or whatever the case may be, but he'd be so gung-ho to get the job done that I'd end up following right in behind him, and we'd get done whatever had to be done. And then Bonnie might be the kindest out of us all, the kindest heart. So as Archie said, that probably nursing probably fit perfectly, but she's just got the kindest heart, always has since we were kids. And Jessie, as Archie's saying, is that I don't know if that's her cover to be that happy, funny person, because she's over the top happy, but it works for us, and it works for me. She too is very kind, but she's got that really bubbly personality where she seems to be happy all the time, or she's always got some jokey thing to say, or a smile on her face. How about that? She's always seemed pretty pleasant.
Well, a few things, I guess. One is that, can we continue to operate in some way that doesn't have to necessarily be financially viable, I suppose, but it does have to, it has to have made enough sense that it kept some people interested in it in one form or another. I don't know that there haven't been a whole lot of restrictions placed on, what we can or can't do with the farm yet, and that may come in time. I don't know. Also, there's some question about how many of us siblings want to remain attached to the farm in one way, or as owners of the farm, or even attached to some other way too. And it's no fault of the farms, but none of us are getting any younger. That's cold reality of it. So, as you get further along in life, you're less than likely to start taking on new risks and new challenges of a significant nature. There is no heir apparent to take over the farm, so it makes things a little bit different that way for sure.
The problem that I feel we're in right now is what's our exit strategy, I call it, because we're getting to an age where absolutely for sure we're less inclined to take on a massive project to do with the farm. I've already got too many things going on there. And then what is what's our 5-year plan? 10 years from now, will I really be that interested? I can't imagine that I will be on a day-to-day basis because I did save some money when I was younger and I do want to enjoy myself. In the golden years, or whatever you might call it, not that I'm going to quit working, but I can't imagine that I would want to be at the farm every day, which, as I was saying earlier, farming is like a day, it's pretty hands-on. Someone has to maintain it quite regularly. And I don't see that we have the ability to have staff, etc. So it is a bit of what are we going to do about that situation? Not myself, I'm not really interested in selling it, but the other part of that, what's the alternative? What are you going to do?
Arch, what are you hopeful for? What are you hopeful for the farm's future?
So that way.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. What I do hope for is that we can come to whatever path we choose, that everybody can come away from it, even if they're not delightfully happy, at least, or sorry, I should say it the other way around, even if they're not totally satisfied, at least they're somewhat happy, but don't come away there with ill feelings. That would, I think, would be unfortunate, to say the least. There's certainly lots of options that could still happen. There's things that we can't even foresee yet, so it's hard to say. But their options are open for sure right now.
Yeah, that everybody could be enjoy that effort we're talking about that our parents put into it, the struggle that they put in. As I was saying, I'm quite certain that finances were really tough. I remember a company called HFC. I don't even know the whole shenanigans of that, but our parents had to borrow money at some high interest rate, and my mom being adamant that every time they had a little bit of extra money, it would go to pay down that. They never talked openly about it, but I know that it existed, or I would hear enough to know that it was some evil thing that existed that had to be dealt with, and my mom was adamant about paying it down. So I know that times were tough, and I would hope that my generation would be able to reconcile the fact of all the effort that they put into it. I don't really need anything from it, but if I had my choice, something would be done to give a bit of a legacy to our parents' effort, without it just being turned into money.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought a new car, or just be turned into money, and then it's forgotten.
Evaporates.
Yeah, I would say that all that tough times would just be forgotten.
You can look at it from many different angles. You can say, why were the circumstances what they were, and how did they come about? But was Bruce said, it could have been worse. Could have been a farm in Murrayville. Pickup truck could have broken down in St. Boniface on the way.
They could have been smokers and drinkers, and those tough times we talked about. What happens to some people when they are faced with a tough time? They turn to drugs and alcohol, and our parents never did. And I think that they were just so rock solid. That I'm sure there were tough times, and they didn't dwell. The kids were not mired in it. They didn't dwell on it. Although I did think about this, because I was the smallest of the four boys. Remember, you said you thought Ross was older. I would get the pants last, and they'd have about 4 hemlines on them from where they were hemmed up and hemmed down, because we didn't have a lot of money. But I always felt we were somewhat happy, but that we had a family. I think that was the most important thing. And I think that is, as I get older, I think that that's more important than, I think that's a human condition. That money's not necessarily the be-all, end-all.